Okay, so I want you to close your eyes for a second. Seriously, just for a moment. Picture yourself standing in the middle of a high-end professional restaurant kitchen. It's, say, 7:30 p.m. on a Friday night, the peak of the dinner rush.
Oh, I can picture it immediately, the sensory overload.
It is absolute chaos. I mean, you've got chefs screaming, "Yes, chef," and it's just echoing off the tiled walls.
Hmm.
You have these heavy copper pans clattering onto burners. There's steam rising from pots, hissing and spitting.
Right.
People are literally sprinting back and forth with plates, dodging each other by like inches. Sweat was dripping down their foreheads. The heat is, it's just incredible, physically oppressive.
It's a really visceral image. You can almost smell the burning garlic, the reduction sauces, and just the stress.
Exactly. The stress. Now, if you looked at that scene from the outside, if you were just a fly on the wall, you'd probably think, wow, these people are working incredibly hard.
For sure.
Look at that hustle. Look at that energy. They are getting things done.
It looks like peak productivity, doesn't it? It looks like work happening at maximum capacity.
It looks like productivity. But here is the kicker, and this is really where we start our deep dive today. Does all that noise and that heat and all that frantic motion, does it actually guarantee a better meal for the customer sitting out there in the dining room?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
In fact, usually it's the opposite. In a kitchen that's that chaotic, things get burned.
Right.
Orders get mixed up, allergy flags get missed. The quality often suffers because of the chaos, not in spite of it.
Precisely. And today we are taking that exact image, the sweaty, noisy, frantic kitchen, and we are applying it to a field that frankly has been sweating in the heat for a very long time. Talent acquisition.
It's a perfect analogy for the source material we're covering today. It frames the problem so clearly.
We're doing a deep dive into a fascinating, and I'd say somewhat provocative, piece of writing by Matt Buckland titled The Evolution of Talent Acquisition Strategy.
Mhm.
And he starts right there with that kitchen analogy.
Yeah.
He argues that for years, talent acquisition, or, TA, it's been hiding behind volume.
Yes.
More roles, more requisitions, more process. Just like that busy kitchen, looking at all the activity and saying, look how valuable we are. Look how much we're sweating.
Right. And Buckland's core premise, his whole argument, is that the market has fundamentally changed. He uses this phrase that I just love. He says the laws of physics are catching up.
I like that.
And what he's saying is that activity is no longer proof of value. Just because you're drowning in resumes, just because you're conducting 50 interviews a week, that doesn't mean you're actually helping the business win.
This is going to be a bit of a wake-up call episode, I think. We aren't just talking about, how to interview better or source candidates on LinkedIn.
No, not at all.
We are unpacking how TA is transforming from a factory floor execution function into a strategic air traffic control center.
And that shift it's just massive. It touches on business survival, it touches on economic literacy, and the really uncomfortable truth about automation. It's a transition from being a service provider, get me a person, to a workforce designer. Here is how we build the capability to win.
So let's dive in. Buckland sets the stage by saying we are entering a transition period. The destination isn't fully defined yet. We don't know exactly what, say, 2030 looks like, but the direction is clear. What's the headline here?
The headline, I think, is the death of reactive hiring.
Which is, that's how most of us have operated for our entire careers, right?
Exactly. The traditional model of TA is, at its core, an order-taking mechanism. A manager has an empty seat, maybe someone quit, maybe they got budget for a new head. They call TA scampers around to fill it. Buckland is saying that whole era is over.
So no more filling vacancies? Is that what we're saying?
Ideally, yes.
Yeah.
That's the goal. The new mandate is strategic workforce planning. Now, I know that sounds like a buzzword.
It does, a bit jargony.
It sounds like something you put on a slide deck and then, you ignore it while you go back to reading resumes. But let's break down what it actually means in this context, because Buckland is very specific.
Please, because everyone claims to be strategic, but usually they're just frantic.
Right. So strategic workforce planning is about anticipating capability gaps. It's not about looking at who left yesterday. It's looking at what the business needs 2, 3, maybe even 5 years from now.
2 to 5 years. I feel like most TA teams are just struggling to plan for next month.
That is exactly the problem. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
If you're only looking at next month, you are always behind. You're always in that busy kitchen.
You're always reacting.
Always. Buckland argues that TA needs to help the business look at the horizon. Ask the big questions. Where are our skills decaying? Where are new skills emerging that we don't have?
So it completely shifts the conversation.
Totally. You stop talking about headcount. which is
Yeah.
just a raw number of bodies and seats. And you start talking about capacity, skills, and trade-offs.
I love that distinction, headcount versus capacity. Can we just unpack that a little bit? Like, what does that difference look like in a real meeting?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Let's kind of role play a headcount meeting. So you're the VP, I'm the recruiter. You say, I need 5 software engineers.
Okay. I need 5 software engineers.
And I say, okay, here's the salary band. I'll post the job on LinkedIn. End of meeting. I go away and I try to find 5 people.
Standard operating procedure. I asked for
Right.
bodies. You gave me a process to get bodies. No friction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, a capacity meeting that looks totally different. You say, I need 5 software engineers.
Okay.
And as a strategic TA leader, I come back with questions. I say, okay, let's look at the product roadmap. I see we're launching a new AI product line in 2027.
Sure.
Do we need 5 generalist engineers?
Mm-hmm.
Or do we actually need 3 machine learning specialists and maybe an automated QA bot?
Oh, okay.
And hey, if we hire them now, do we have the internal capacity to train them on our stack? Or should we maybe buy that talent from a consultancy for the first 6 months to get us started?
That is a fundamentally different conversation. You're not just taking the order anymore. You are interrogating the need.
It's asking, how do we solve the business problem? Not just, how do we fill the chair? You're discussing trade-offs. You're discussing timing. You're discussing the actual work that needs to be done, not just the job title on a piece of paper.
But doing that, that requires a completely different set of skills for the TA professional, doesn't it? Buckland mentioned something that I found really, really interesting. He calls it economic literacy.
Yes. This is such a critical point. In fact, I'd probably say it's the pivot point of his whole article. He says future TA leaders have to be economically literate.
Right.
And he's remarkably specific about what that means. It isn't just knowing your recruiting metrics like, time to fill or cost per hire.
No, he says it's about reading a P&L, a profit and loss statement. It's about understanding margin pressure, understanding business models.
And you have to ask why. Why is that important? Because talent choices are business choices. They shape risk, they shape cost, they shape productivity, and ultimately revenue. These aren't abstract concepts to the CFO. They're the only deliverables that matter.
But why does a recruiter need to understand margin pressure? That really feels like the finance team's job,
Because talent choices directly, and I mean directly, shape the margins. Let me give you a concrete example of why this matters so much.
Please do.
Okay, let's say a company is under margin pressure. Their profits are razor thin. A traditional TA leader, thinking transactionally, might think, okay, the company needs to save money. I'll help by hiring cheaper people. I'll lower the salary bands to save on the cost line of the P&L.
Seems logical on the surface. Cut costs to help the bottom line.
It does, but an economically literate TA leader might look at the business model and say, wait a minute, the reason our margins are so low is that our customer churn is too high. Our product keeps breaking because we have inexperienced developers.
Ah, I see where this is going.
So if I hire cheaper, lower quality engineers, the product gets worse, churn goes up, and our margins get even worse. The economically correct move, the move that actually saves the business, is to pay more for higher quality talent to fix the product, reduce that churn, and stabilize the revenue stream.
So the cheap hire is actually the most expensive mistake you can make.
Precisely. But you can only make that argument if you understand the mechanics of the business's revenue. If you can't speak that language, you remain, as Buckland puts it, persuasive but not decisive.
Persuasive but not decisive. Oof. That stings a little bit, but it's true.
It's the missing link, isn't it? You often hear HR professionals say they want a seat at the table. Buckland is basically saying the price of admission to that table is economic literacy. You have to be able to explain how a hiring decision either amplifies or constrains the entire business model.
It shifts the dynamic from being a service provider to being a true business partner. You stop being the waiter taking the order, and you become the nutritionist designing the diet for the whole organization.
That is a perfect way to put it. Absolutely perfect.
Okay, so to be that nutritionist, you obviously need data, but not just any data. This brings us to section 2 of our deep dive, the data and the courage to say no.
Yeah, and Buckland has a bit of a critique here about the current state of data in TA. He calls it dashboards for the sake of dashboards.
Oh, we have all seen those. The monthly business review where there are 50 charts, lots of green arrows, pie charts about where candidates came from.
Yeah, but what do they actually tell you? I mean, really, usually they just tell you about activity. We made 500 calls this week. We screened 50 resumes. Our time to fill is 40 days.
They're vanity metrics.
That's all they are. They make you feel good about being busy.
We're right back to the kitchen. Look how many pans I banged together.
Exactly. Buckland's argument is that the future requirement isn't just presenting data. It's about interpreting data to drive outcomes that leaders actually genuinely care about.
So it's moving from just reporting the weather to actually predicting the storm.
Yes. And here is the pivot point regarding metrics that really caught my attention. Buckland says TA will no longer be judged on speed.
Whoa. Okay, hold on. Speed has been the holy grail for decades. Time to fill is on every single recruiter's performance review. How fast can you get a butt in this seat?
And Buckland is saying that has to change. The judgment should be on judgment. The goal is to help organizations make better decisions, not just faster ones. And sometimes the right decision is to slow down.
That feels like such a huge culture shift. I mean, most managers want that person yesterday.
Which brings us to what he calls the era of courage. This is my favorite part of the article, to be honest, because it frames TA as a true advisory role and real advisory work.
Right.
It requires trade-offs.
And trade-offs imply conflict?
They do, absolutely. The unspoken implication of this whole future state, according to Buckland, is that TA will increasingly have to say no.
No to what specifically?
Well, for starters, no to unnecessary rules. No to unrealistic candidate profiles. You know, the manager who's looking for the purple squirrel.
Ugh, the purple squirrel. The candidate with a PhD, 10 years of experience, who's also willing to work for an entry-level salary. And of course, they can start tomorrow.
That's the one. The traditional recruiter spends 3 months trying to find that person, failing, and then getting blamed for it. The strategic recruiter looks at the market data, the actual supply data, and says, no, this person does not exist at this price point. We have 3 choices here. We raise the budget, we lower the requirements, or we train someone internally to do this.
You're forcing the business to confront reality.
Yes. And that takes backbone. It takes courage. Buckland explicitly states this is not a softer future role. Use a harder one. You are challenging leadership. You're telling a hiring manager, look, I know you want to hire for this role, but looking at the market data and our budget, we should actually automate this task instead.
That is a very tough conversation to have, especially if that manager is trying to build their little empire by adding headcount.
Exactly. You are standing in the way of their kingdom building with cold, hard economic logic. That requires political capital. But think about it. If you just say yes to everything, you're just an order taker. If you say no with data to back it up, you become a partner.
No is a complete sentence, but I guess in business, no, and here's the data why is a strategy.
Perfectly put. That's exactly it. And the scope of influence changes completely. The future TA partner influences how work is designed, not just who does it. If your impact stops at the signed offer, Buckland says you are already behind the curve.
Behind the curve. I don't think any of us want to be there.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit to Section 3. We really can't talk about the future without talking about technology, AI, and the human differentiator.
It's the engine driving all of this change, isn't it? It's just unavoidable.
And Buckland is pretty blunt here. He says AI literacy is not a hobby. It's not about watching a vendor demo and just nodding along while they throw buzzwords at you. Right. It requires a real working understanding. You need to know what tasks can and should be automated, what should be augmented by AI, and, critically, where humans still outperform the machines.
He has this quote that really stuck with me. TA professionals who can shape technology will replace those who are shaped by it.
That is the stake in the ground right there. If you sit back and wait for AI to happen to you, you are going to be replaced. If you actively get in there and shape how AI is used in your strategy, you become indispensable. It implies you need to be the driver, not the passenger.
But as we automate more, as hiring becomes faster and more, as he says, machine-mediated, Buckland raises a really important concern about opacity.
The black box problem, it's a huge issue. If an algorithm is screening all the resumes, who checks the algorithm? Do we know why it picked candidate A over candidate B? Is it biased?
So this brings up his idea of governance as a strategic asset.
Yes. And usually, when we hear the word governance, we think of boring compliance policies. We think of legal.
Right. Did we fill out the form? Did we tick the box? It sounds like the legal department crashing the party.
Buckland just flips that on its head.
Yeah.
He says as things get faster and more opaque, TA becomes the steward of fairness, of explainability, and of legitimacy, bias management, and ethical AI use. They're not just legal requirements anymore. They are strategic assets that build candidate trust.
So you're saying if I'm a candidate and I know your company uses AI in an ethical and transparent way, I'm going to trust you more.
Exactly. And trust is currency in this market. Think about it from your own experience. If you apply to a job and you get a rejection email 3 seconds later, you know a human didn't read it.
Yeah, you feel devalued.
You feel like a data point. You
Yeah.
feel like you wasted your time. You feel like the company doesn't care.
Mm-hmm.
But if the process is designed to be transparent, if it says, here's how we use AI to match key skills, and here's the point where a human comes in to assess your potential, that builds trust, and this links directly to his next point on experience design.
He calls it CX for hiring, basically. Customer experience thinking applied to candidates.
Yes, because if the mechanics are all automated, the scheduling, the initial screening, the assessments, what is left for the human to do?
The experience, the feeling, the human connection.
That's it. When the mechanics are automated, the experience becomes the only way to compete for top talent.
So the recruiter isn't a processor of candidates anymore. They become a candidate experience designer.
Applying customer experience thinking to recruitment. It is one of the few areas where humans consistently, and I mean consistently, add value over bots. A bot can schedule an interview, but it can't make a candidate feel seen and understood.
It can't look a candidate in the eye and sell the vision of the company culture.
It can't reassure a candidate who is nervous about relocating their family for a job. That empathy, that persuasion, that ability to read the room, that is the human differentiator. That's where the value is.
Okay, so we have the strategy, we have the data, we have the courage and the tech. Now let's talk about the people themselves. Section 4, the changing shape of the team.
And this is where things get really real. And honestly, this is the part of the article that might make some listeners a little uncomfortable.
Buckland addresses what he calls the legitimacy crisis of TA.
Yes. Historically, TA has been viewed as, an administrative necessity. It's essential, but it's also been seen as peripheral,
Yeah.
a cost center. Just go get me the bodies.
Like the utility company, you only really notice them when the lights go out.
That's a great way to put it. But leaders are finally realizing that poor talent decisions are incredibly expensive. Bad hires cost a fortune. But Buckland warns that legitimacy isn't just granted automatically. It must be seized by leaders who are willing to make this transition.
And the risk if you don't, you get pulled right back into that service function box.
Right. If you don't step up and claim that strategic ground, you go right back to being the order taker in the kitchen. You remain a transactional utility.
He uses that powerful analogy again here, contrasting air traffic control with the factory floor.
It is such a good mental model to hold in your head. The factory floor is about execution. Crank the handle, fill the roll, repeat. It's about volume and efficiency. How many widgets did we make today?
And air traffic control, what's the difference?
Air traffic control is all about orchestration. You've got planes coming in, which are candidates. You've got planes taking off, employees leaving. You have weather patterns, which are market trends. You have mechanical issues, which are skills gaps. You aren't flying the planes yourself. You are managing the flow of the entire system to ensure safety and speed and efficiency. You're looking at the radar, you're preventing collisions, and you're optimizing the routes.
And that implies a very different team structure. You don't need 1,000 people in the control tower.
No, absolutely not. The team will not be a large army of processors. It will be smaller, higher skilled, and deeply, deeply embedded in the business units.
Smaller. That's the scary word, isn't it?
It is. And Buckland doesn't shy away from what he calls the painful transition. He calls it an uncomfortable truth. Teams will shrink, roles will disappear, professional identities are going to be challenged.
That is really tough to hear. I mean, if you've spent your entire career doing a specific type of recruiting work, say, you're the best at finding that needle in a haystack on LinkedIn, and then that work just goes away.
It's a crisis of identity for so many people. They'll ask themselves, what is my value if the machine can do the thing I used to do? And Buckland notes that TA leaders have a huge leadership burden here.
How so?
They have to reskill some people, they have to exit others with dignity, and they have to maintain morale while essentially dismantling the very work their teams built their careers on. It's an enormous challenge.
He has a quote that I think is so important. This is not a moral judgment, it is an economic shift.
That is the key. You have to separate the person from the task. It's not that the manual CV screener is a bad person or a bad worker. It's just that the economic value of that specific task has dropped to zero because software can now do it instantly and better. Pretending it isn't happening doesn't help anyone. It's just an economic reality we have to face.
So let's get specific then. Who stays and who goes? Section 5. Buckland actually lists roles that are destined for the archive.
Yeah, these are the roles that he says will just, quietly disappear.
What's on that list?
Coordinators whose primary value is just scheduling. Manual CV screeners, administrative order takers, interview note takers.
So basically, anything that is repetitive and rules-based, that's the theme.
Exactly. The rule of thumb is, if a task is repetitive, low judgment, and rules-based, it will be automated.
Right.
If your job can be described with a simple flowchart, if X, then Y, an AI can and will do it.
So if your core job is looking for keywords on a PDF document, you're in trouble.
Yes. But roles are also just changing shape. They're not all disappearing.
Right.
What happens to the recruiter, for example? They become talent advisors. They shed all that admin work. They stop scheduling. They stop screening. They focus on persuasion, on judgment, on negotiation, and on closing candidates.
All the high-value human stuff.
Exactly. And their KPIs, their metrics, they shift from time to fill to quality and impact. The questions become, did this hire stay? Did they perform well? Did they actually add tangible value to the business?
And what about hiring managers? How does their role change?
This is interesting. They actually take on more of the process themselves, but they're supported by what he calls AI co-pilots. So the manager might use an AI to write the initial job description and even screen the first batch of applicants, which reduces the dependency on TA for basic execution.
Which then frees up the TA Pro to do that strategic advisory work we were talking about.
Exactly. It frees them up to have the high-level conversation, to say, okay, you've got these 3 fantastic finalists. Let's talk about the team dynamics. Let's talk about the compensation strategy. Let's talk about how we're going to close the best one and not lose them to a competitor.
So are there any new roles emerging? Are there new jobs actually being created in this new world?
Yes, and they're fascinating. Buckland identifies a few key ones. First, talent intelligence leads. These are people who interpret labor market data to advise on those build, buy, or bought decisions.
Build, buy, or bought. I really like that framework. It's so clear.
It's the central question of the future workforce, isn't it? Do we build this skill internally, which is training? Do we buy it from the market, which is hiring? Or do we bought it, which is automation? You need a human intelligence lead to make that strategic call based on data.
Who else? What other new roles?
Community managers. This is about shifting from hunting individual candidates to gathering whole communities of talent. It's farming instead of hunting, building relationships with people before you even have a job opening for them.
And what about AI operations specialists?
Yes, this one kind of blows my mind a little bit. It sounds so futuristic, but it's real.
What does an AI operations specialist do in an HR or TA function?
They manage the digital workers.
Mm.
You have to manage your AI agents and your bots just as deliberately as you manage your human teams. Are they performing correctly? Are they developing biases? Are they calibrated to the right settings?
That is just wild to think about. Having a meeting and saying, hey, bot 3 is underperforming this quarter. It's rejecting too many qualified candidates from this demographic.
Exactly. You need to check the code. You need to audit the outputs. That is a full-time job.
And finally, he mentions experience designers, making sure that humanity doesn't get lost in all this tech.
Yes. Someone whose entire job is designing the touch points so the candidate feels respected and valued, even in a highly automated world.
This all brings us to Section 6, the liquid workforce and the final vision. Buckland argues that the traditional boundaries are just dissolving.
They're completely dissolving between talent acquisition, talent management, and learning and development. You can't keep them in separate silos anymore.
Why not? What's the danger in that?
Because the solution to a talent problem isn't always hiring someone new. If the best answer is, we should train an internal person for this role, that's usually an L&D function. If the answer is, let's hire a contractor for 6 months, that's usually procurement or a different department.
Right.
If the answer is, hire a full-timer, that's TA. Buckland is saying those walls have to come down so we can look at the problem holistically and pick the best solution, not just the one that fits in our departmental box.
And that leads to the idea of the liquid workforce. It's not just about hiring full-time employees anymore, is it?
No, not at all. It's about managing a mix, a portfolio of talent. You have your full-time employees, your contractors, your gig workers, and increasingly your digital workers, your AI agents.
Total talent management.
Exactly. Headcount gives way to capability. The core question isn't, do we have a person for this job? The question is, do we have the capability to get this work done? And maybe we buy that capability. Maybe we rent it. Maybe we build it internally, or maybe we automate it.
TA evolves into a workforce design function.
That is the pinnacle. That's the end goal.
Yeah.
You are designing the entire workforce architecture for the company, not just filling the empty seats in the stadium.
And the tool set obviously expands with that. He mentions agentic AI, orchestration layers, skills-based assessments, replacing the traditional resume.
And with all those new tools come new durable human skills, the things that last. Buckland lists them very clearly: curiosity, critical thinking, empathy, and adaptability.
Those are the things the AI can't do yet.
Exactly. Those are the real currency of the future. The spreadsheet can be automated. The critical thinking about what the spreadsheet means, that cannot.
So, wow, we have covered a lot of ground here. From the chaotic kitchen all the way to the air traffic control tower, from reactive order taking to strategic workforce planning, from a fear of AI to actually mastering it as a tool.
It's a comprehensive evolution. It really is a complete reimagining of the entire function from top to bottom.
Buckland ends with a bit of a warning, though, doesn't he?
He does. He has this very sharp closing line. He says, "The future will not be kind to TA teams that mistake motion for progress or nostalgia for strategy."
Nostalgia for strategy, that hits hard. Just because we've always done it that way doesn't mean it's a strategy for the future.
We post a job and we pray. That's nostalgia. And that just won't work anymore.
But he also says the opportunity has never been bigger.
For those who are willing to let go of the old ways,
Exactly.
if you can broaden your craft, if you can sharpen your judgment and really embrace this shift, you stop being a service function and you become a strategic architect of the business. You move from the weeds to the tower.
So I want to leave our listener with a final provocative thought based directly on Matt Buckland's work. As you go about your week, just ask yourself this. Are you acting as an air traffic controller for capability, orchestrating the complex future of your workforce? Or are you still just sweating in the kitchen, banging pans together, trying to get plates out the door as fast as you can?
It is the defining question for the industry right now. It really is. And you have to make a choice.
It really is. Thank you so much for breaking all of this down with us today.
It was my pleasure. This was a great conversation.
And to all of you listening, thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.